Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, and you have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. And it's finale week, the biggest shows we do all year. And as we do every year, we're starting things off with our top 10 films of 2023. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler here at my home in Los Angeles. This is the 9th time that we've been able to do a top 10 on this show. We started the show with an Oscar preview back on February 20th, 2015. So, of course, our first top 10 was later that same season at for the 2015 films. This is the 420th total video that we've done as a part of the No Name Cinema Society, including vlogs, since we started back in February of 2015. We've been able to do 24 videos in the 2023 season. And we got 2 more shows coming up in the next few days. This is what the rest of the finale week looks like. Of course, tonight is the top 10 films of 2020-23. Tomorrow night is the Oscar preview, in which we're going to tell you who we think is going to win. We're going to do some predictions, and then we're going to tell you what we think should win in each of the categories and who should have been nominated that was not. And Thursday night, March 7th, will be one of our most popular shows of any given year, our classic year in review. And this year, we're going back 25 years to look at the Oscar races from 1998 and our 1998 in review. That is what's coming up this week. Both the co-hosts are doing the top 10 show for the first time tonight. And so, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, a talented actress who's dating a global superstar that's also a narcissist and has homosexual tendencies. So she decided to leave LA for the real world, only to discover it was destroyed by the atomic bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly O'Malley is here.
Hey.
And also with us, ladies and gentlemen, a talented author that I knew in a different life, in a different city, whom I had to remake in my lab when her opus didn't sell, but she rebelled against me and moved to Oklahoma to get rich on other people's oil. Returning after a 5-year absence and live from Chicago, ladies and gentlemen, Thalia Mostow is here.
Hi, with dogs.
Hi. This is the drinking slide, everyone. And this wasn't around when Thalia was last around, but the fans, they made up a drinking game, things that they drink to when we do them on the show. And obviously you won't have one because you were on the show before we did much drinking. But anytime I say contrived, contrivance, all time, or verisimilitude, or diegesis, or anytime Kelly makes fun of Devin, those are times that we drink on the show, and the audience drinks as well. But Kelly has not been making fun of Devin lately. She's been focusing on her ire on me.
Tonight I'll give the fans what they want.
And the first thing we want to talk about is how many movies. So first thing I want to do is show this chart. This is a chart featuring how many films we watched per year. If you discount the original members who regularly hit triple digits, especially Davey, the most ever was in 2021 with Matt Polish having watched 73 films from 2021. The lowest ever is Max from last year. If you can see at the bottom there, only saw 14 films in 2022 and crafted a top 10 out of those 14 films. And as a result, Max is no longer with us on the show. Hopefully, these guys will have beaten that. Our list comes from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. So we follow their same rules, which goes back to exclude films that were released day and date on streaming. And as such, we're back to a similar number of total films that we've seen in the past. There are 320 eligible films that were released in the calendar year 2023, 18 more than last year. Kelly remarked to me early on that there were several films that we both saw together in theaters that didn't qualify for whatever reason. Possibly the theatrical release requirements, even possibly sometimes a clerical error. They didn't submit information in time. Either way, they're ineligible for the Oscars and the Academy, so that they are equally ineligible for our list. So now I'm going to find out what these guys, their numbers is. We'll see. Hopefully it's more than Max's 14. Kelly, how many did you get to in 2023?
57.
Excellent. And I think that would be enough for second place, excluding J Money and Davey on the all-time list. So congratulations on that. Now I want to, my disclaimer here for Thalia is that she, you may have heard us announce that Patrick and Kelly are going to be doing the show. Patrick bailed, so Kelly, so Thalia filled in at the last minute. So her number is going to understandably be much smaller because she sort of came in late in the game. Thalia, how many did you manage to get to from 2023?
Only 36, which I felt like, given my time, was better than maybe I thought I'd get to.
36, Thalia, is amazing, quite frankly, given how late in the game you came in, and also like that's actually like it might be in the upper percentile. Like if you look at that chart, a lot of those people come in at 24, 25. Great job, everybody. Cheers to you both. Thanks for watching all those movies. Kelly, I appreciate.
Cheers.
Jonathan, how many did you watch? I'm sorry, I don't know.
I'm about to tell you.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I saw 103 films from 2023 this year, tied for my fourth highest amount and fifth best overall. Out of that total, I saw 61 in theaters, the most since the lockdown. And as it happens, an appropriate percentage of 6 films in my top 10 were films I saw in the theater, suggesting that things might be getting a little closer to the normal that we remember. This is another thing that Thalia won't be ready for, but Kelly will. I don't know if you guys, Kelly, remember. So I've got these index cards. Some of the audience, if this isn't your first top 10, you know what this is about. So on the other side of these index cards are things that my predictions for your number 1 films of 2023. I've made some guesses as to what they were. I've been doing it pretty much every year. I don't remember when I started. I think I started in 2017. The only time I've got it right on a top 10 is I did for Matt Polis in 2021. I did predict that he would select The Lost Daughter as his number 1 film in 2021, and I did get that right. The films I select are almost always on the person's list, but only that one time was it ever number 1. So the next question I have to ask you guys is, we call it the biggest movie missed. If you could watch one more movie from 2023, what would it be? Discounting availability, what would be the next movie you could watch if you could? Thalia?
Yeah, I didn't see Poor Things, which I really think I probably would have and just didn't get to see it in the theaters, and it wasn't streaming in time.
Yeah, and again, disclosure, because of her 10-year-old daughter, you don't get to go to the theater very often anymore. So almost everything you watched was at home.
Barbie might have been the only one I saw. So one movie maybe this year in the movie theater.
And Kelly, if you could watch one more movie, what would it be?
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
It did win the Annie Award for Animated Film of the Year, and it's nominated at the Oscars. Now it's time for my movie, and one of the big ones was The Teacher's Lounge, nominated for Best International Film, that is only in a few theaters here and there. The one that I could watch that I didn't is a film called Dream Scenario. I could afford to rent one additional movie, and I chose something different and regretted it. I should have done Dream Scenario instead, so that won't appear on my top 10. And so, without further ado, it's time to start off our top 10 films of 2023 with, appropriately enough, number 10. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Kelly, what is your number 10 film of 2023?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think James Gunn really uses the superhero genre to actually really dig into some important themes, like the exploration of what happens when we move on, being okay with saying goodbye and the grief that comes from that. I was very moved by it. I thought it was really well done. I took a lot from it thematically, not just the overall enjoyment.
It's not going to make my top 10. It's a net positive film for me, though. I did like the film. I still prefer the first one in the trilogy, and I like this better than the second one. A lot of great stuff. I liked it. I liked that it was trying to do some extra things. It checked off a lot of the boxes, not as, and this isn't a negative, it's just not as successful as some of these other films. Definitely successful. 7 out of 10 kind of range. Not that I usually use those rankings, but just to clarify myself a little further. Thalia, I don't suppose that's one of the 36 that you saw.
See it? No.
And that brings me to Talia's number 10 film of 2023.
Okay. Mine is Leo, which brought me so much joy. I watch a lot of kids' movies. Most of them are pretty horrible, frankly. And then Fox watched Leo without me and begged me to watch it with her. It's made me very happy and very silly. And I love Adam Sandler. Kind of amazing.
I can now tell you, Thalia, that Leo is a top 20 film for me. It's not going to crack my top 10. Very, very good. Wonderful, sweet, very funny, and extremely insightful into modern childhood. However, films 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you know what I mean? It's the butts. Which had bigger butts? And when I say that, I mean, when I say that, I mean what, the quibbles. And the quibbles might seem small, but they're big enough to divide 9, 10 from 11 and 12 and 13 and so forth and so on. So upon closer inspection for me, Leo can be simplistic, reductive, and repetitive, which might be okay for a kid's movie because maybe these lessons need to come in smaller pills. But there were other kids' movies, and one that I have coming up that I think is a little more successful. As much as I love Robert Smigel, I also think the songs aren't as strong as they are in some other films that I saw this year. So much of the script works without the songs. Again, being nitpicky, the animation visually isn't as impressive. It lacked visual impact. The vocal talent oversells a lot of their moments. I personally am not an Adam Sandler person. He was doing a little bit of shtick. I love the script. I think Robert Smigel is a comedic genius. I laughed out loud a lot. And there's tons of lessons about empathy, listening, and the realities of growing up that are deeply felt and delivered with a lot of very successful humor. Aside from the aforementioned hiccups, it's very accomplished, well written, and most importantly, emotionally engaging. It flirted with the top 10, but enough of those quibbles to just keep it off for me. And out of 100 movies, that's not too bad.
One of my favorite parts about the film too was that the kindergartners visually looked different. They had larger eyeballs, their face shapes were different. And it feels like when you're in a room with gardeners. And so I thought that was sort of perfection.
Kelly, any chance you saw Leo?
Oh, I saw Leo. I love Leo. And I actually liked the animation. I liked that it was like more simple, and I liked the style of it. I thought it fit the story really well.
All right, I'm going to move on to my number 10 film of 2023. And my number 10 is from a filmmaker who Kelly and I reviewed back in episode 63.2. From the director of 45 Years comes All of Us Strangers. And once again, I'm really impressed by Andrew Hay on a strictly personal level, in spite of some minor bumps. It mostly displays some beautifully, deeply felt work. It's almost Bergman-esque in its approach, with a central thesis that I think is really about the inability to connect with someone until you are able to confront your trauma, which is a constant battle. Its magical realism also reminded me of Field of Dreams, but with an artsier, more personal approach. I think the excellent score also does a lot of the heavy lifting, especially with all the long silences, which are a bit stylized, but given the nature of the film, it makes more sense here than it did in even 45 Years. Andrew Scott is extremely impressive in channeling all the confusion, childhood trauma played out in his adult, which is all about covering, and covering some more. When confronted with our parents again, alive or otherwise, regression is inevitable. I think it's some wonderful, nuanced work. The other thing I was thinking about with this film thematically was loneliness. And how do we cope with that? In this case, the creative type invents a reality to be loved, and maybe that's okay. As long as he perceives love, what's the difference? But perhaps one of the failings of the film, small, very small, obviously it's a top 10 film, in its limited scope, is that it doesn't really explore how that overactive imagination might impact the here and now. As beautiful as the invention is, it could have serious consequences on the outside unless one is a complete shut-in. It's a really interesting concept. Regardless, I think it's obviously a high-minded, mostly well-crafted, very emotional and layered film. Talia, any chance you saw All of Us Strangers?
No, I did not get a chance to.
Kelly, All of Us Strangers.
Well, I just learned that I should read your emails more clearly, because I too desperately wanted to see it. I haven't seen it.
Moving right along, since they didn't see it, ladies and gentlemen, time to move on to number 9. Nueve. Number 9, let's see who's first. Talia, what is your number 9 film of 2023?
The Color Purple. I love a musical, and my kid loves a musical. It felt like The Color Purple for a new generation, which I really loved. I thought the dancing was phenomenal, and the singing and Danielle Brooks was amazing. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I thought it was beautiful at times, and I was deeply moved.
We had a lot of positive, good feeling out of all our number 10s. They didn't even see mine. So now we're going to have our first major disagreement. And I'm coming from a place that also did enjoy the stage production, which is why I feel really strongly that this adaptation just did not work for the screen. The hurdle with musicals very often is that most modern audiences are loath to accept bursting out into song. Filmmakers have found ways around this over the years, moving all the songs to a stage like in Chicago or Cabaret or Nine, or making all the songs personal, as in no one else realizes they are singing, so it doesn't interrupt the diegesis. They're either fantasy sequences or soliloquies. This film does both in a weird sort of way, and it doesn't make a hard and fast decision on this, and it winds up being a hodgepodge to me. The songs are okay in the musical theater history, like none of them sort of stand out as well. I don't come out singing or humming anything. The only great thing about the movie to me, Danielle Brooks' performance was phenomenal, I felt. The musical numbers that worked best were those that were indeed fantasy sequences, but the others were awkward, and the choreography felt meant for the stage. I'm looking at it from a very cinematic point of view. Yes, nice dancing, but the way they shot the dancing was very proscenium, not taking advantage of the cinematic medium. A lot of the performers get caught in the middle. There's a lot of design thing that's great. The costumes are among the best of the year. Felt the cinematography was awfully glossy, almost too nice and self-aware. I feel like given the circumstances, it shouldn't look that good. Given where they are, like it was a little too polished from a cinematography point of view, because I feel like grittier cinematography, along with this idea of a musical, would have been more impactful thematically. I think that it's a shame to me because the story is obviously wonderful and important, less about racism than it is about abuse and self-confidence, especially for minorities in a racist country. It's a time capsule kind of book, story, and musical, but this adaptation doesn't do the story any favors. And so as far as I'm concerned, from a cinematic point of view, Kelly, do you see Color Purple?
I absolutely hated it. And I'm so sorry. I absolutely hated it. And a big part was I could tell it had been adapted for the stage and they didn't really adapt it for film. It was hard for me.
For what it's worth, Talia, nobody disagrees with me on the show more than Kelly. So the fact that she was leaning in my direction is quite shocking. But also she set it up. I don't know if you noticed, she very actory moment of just like pause, pause, pause. And I'm like, oh, she's going to let me have it. And no, it wasn't quite like that. So it was very well played by Kelly. Talia, your chance to rebut.
I think some of this is like personal stuff. I watch every movie almost on this list with my kid. And so a lot of how I'm viewing things is watching her watching them. And from the minute it opened, she just was staring at it. And it was so exciting for me to see her be so enraptured and asking so many questions. I love opportunities for us to have conversation when we're watching movies. I really thought the costumes were spectacular. I thought a lot of it reflected that there is great beauty, even in really hard and dark moments, particularly in the moments of friendship between the women, which I thought was very beautiful.
And I do like the color scheme of the costumes. That element might have even be highlighted more if the cinematography weren't as music video glossy. You know what I mean? Like if the cinematography were a little grittier, then those sparkles of beauty in the costumes, specifically the costumes, because she becomes a wardrobe maker. So if that is the area of beauty in a gritty, dark, world, I think that emphasizes your point even further.
It felt dreamlike, at times. I agree that it didn't always fit, right? That it was a grittier story, and it was very, very glossy. And also, I think that's part of what I love about musicals sometimes, is that they are a little glossy.
So it's time for Kelly's number 9 film of 2023.
It's Leo.
Okay, our first crossover, but it won't be the film that's on all 3 lists. It could have been. I think I had it like 14, 15, somewhere in that area. Anything you'd like to add to Leo?
No, I feel like I've said what I like about it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too, obviously. But although, it is not my number 1 animated film of the year, and I'll get to that. Talia, and you covered Leo a lot. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I was back and forth between Leo and The Color Purple and 9 and 10. I mean, really up until a few hours ago, they were switching places. So Leo was also almost my number 9.
All right. My number 9, I was really fascinated by all the layers of May, December. On one hand, it's an exploration of love and age that winds up with a reminder of maybe what we suspected all along. Add that to many traumas, the coping and how art can help, but also how art can trigger. And we can't forget this other element in which it also explores the artistic process in what I felt was a very captivating way, the inherent problems when recreating the lives of real living people. Responsibility to them, and also how that might sometimes contradict with your responsibility to the truth. Todd Haynes, as a director, is a master of mise-en-scène. Some beautiful work here. Scene work, camera work, ideas, many of which were subtle and nuanced. The whole thing was more of a cerebral exercise, but that has its place. I think the whole ensemble is really strong, with the exception of the performance I was hearing the most about. I found Charles Melton to be false in his more challenging moments and dully muted in the rest. It feels like a performance the director had to work around, but the 2 ladies, Natalie Portman is real good, but to me it's Julianne Moore who steals the movie, offering one of the more complicated, interesting portrayals of a broken person that I interpret as being in an extreme denial, and that's part of the fun of following Portman's character. We are detectives along with her. This one feels like one of the more accomplished films of the year. It's clearly smart and deep, well worth the watch to me. I've got May, December, ladies and gentlemen. Talia, any chance you saw May, December?
Yeah, I did see it. I don't think I loved this one. I didn't dislike it, but it was really hard for me to separate my feelings about the movie from feelings about the situation that the movie was based on. And then I think the movie was really strongest in its last few minutes where she was filming and felt like I understood. Yeah, I did not love Natalie, and I love Julianne Moore.
So there's some disagreement there as well. I mean, like, it's that story which is sort of interesting, but add to that this idea of the artistic recreation of that story. Then we start adding these layers of identity. That's what really sent the movie over the top to me, is like there was so much going on. Kelly, May, December.
Like, it was fine. I felt like it wasn't fully realized. I didn't care for it. Yeah, but Julianne Moore was fantastic.
So time to move on to number 8, The Ocho. Kelly, your number 8 film.
Champions. I loved it, and it brought me joy. It was a very predictable in a lot of ways, but like it made me feel good. And it's a movie that when I watched it, I was immediately like brought in and felt like I had joy.
So Champions was a film I watched in theaters like early. Like it was an early release, maybe March. I remember feeling it was an early contender for a top 10. I'm like, okay, I've already got a good movie in the bank here for 2023. So I also did enjoy Champions. As the year went along, the movie slipped further and further down for the reasons you sort of intimated, as well intentioned as it is. And it's really good and funny and charming. It is very formulaic, and it leans into that cheese factor a little bit when comparing, the best films of the year for me. Like that sent it further down the list. But again, another very net positive. I did enjoy Champions very much. Thought it was very smart in a lot of ways, but very formulaic and predictable in all the ways that a lot of the fun movies of our past are. Thalia, any chance you saw Champions?
I didn't see Champions. I don't even know what Champions is about. Now I feel awful that I don't.
I think there's a reason why we have the formulas, and I think it's great when we as artists, go outside of that and that leads to some amazing films. But I also think there's something, it's to being able to take the formula and doing it well versus just taking the formula and making something mediocre. They were an example for me of like how you can tell with all those similar beats that are coming, how you can still tell an enjoyable, emotionally impactful story.
I certainly don't think I used the word mediocre.
I was just talking in general.
And I completely agree. The formula works. I think for me, they've got the formula, but they also leaned in this sort of like a saccharine kind of way, whether score swells or slow motion in these moments or what have you, that really leaned in. Small choices that separate the top 20 films of the year or something like that. Really, really quite fun and good and charming. I want to be very clear about that. So it's time for Thalia's number 8.
Oppenheimer. I enjoyed it because it's been a really long time since I've seen a big movie. I sort of enjoyed the things that I learned. I was amazed by the performances, Robert Downey Jr. in particular.
It is my least favorite of the 10 Oscar nominees and a film I truly hate. It's not going to be my worst film of the year, but I passionately hate Oppenheimer and honestly most Christopher Nolan films with the exception of 2. And I think it's a great story. What a waste by falling into the same traps that so many of these biopics do and cover too much ground, and the result is racing through a bullet-pointed history of a subject of historical significance. To me, it's a Wikipedia page of a movie that forgoes any real sense of character development, which ironically renders the whole thing moot to me. We're told several times how Oppenheimer feels about X, Y, or Z, or sometimes is presumed to feel about X, Y, or Z, but none of it lands viscerally in spite of a few nightmare sequences. I've seen a one-act play that captures Oppenheimer better than this boring 3-hour epic. To me, it's like an epic fail. I think Cillian Murphy is a fine actor who does what's asked of him, but I don't think this script gave him the opportunity to really get underneath the character. The one good thing I have to say about it, 2 good things, Robert Downey Jr., I didn't even recognize him. I didn't even know he was in this movie and did not recognize him the whole time. Would vote for him in the supporting actor category. And I thought the score was really strong. It was unique in terms of instrumentation and style without being manipulative. To me, this movie is just a list of facts and history with limited perspective or emotional engagement. Kelly and Oppenheimer.
I really loved Oppenheimer. I loved the score, Robert Downey Jr. It didn't feel like a biopic. I know it is. I didn't think the script always did a good job of making sure you followed or you needed to and like finding the balance of when they were over explaining and how you're saying, but like also wasn't taking care of you where you needed to be. I got to see it on the big IMAX. I felt like I was going to a movie.
I actually did feel like I could see how conflicted the characters were about what they were doing. I really was moved. It did feel really like a movie, capital M.
And obviously, I'm in the minority about this. Like I said, it's going to win Best Picture. I have to be honest. The fans watch because I have so many different opinions than other people. So time for my number 8. And almost every year, I have at least 2 Best Picture nominees on my top 10. In 2021, I happen to have 4, which is the most ever. Very rare. But this will be the lowest ever. This is the only Best Picture nominee on my list tonight. And I did feel like it's one of the most fully realized visionary films of the year. To me, Barbie is extremely thorough world building from the top down. Direction, script, performance, design, music. Its primary drawback is a small one, occasional heavy-handedness. Some of the speech-making felt pandering, but perhaps this is one of those films that's meant to shake up the supposed lowest common denominator. I felt Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie are pitch perfect for what was asked for. Both committed fully to the vision that Gerwig and Baumbach and the movie, and all the better for it. The feminism is what everyone is talking about and is the thing that's sometimes on the nose, but one of the more effective surprises to me is its commentary on codependency, which in its own way adds balance to the complicated sexual politics it dares to tackle. For all its sharp wit and humor, I also found myself moved and saddened in many different ways. Not that anything that it was addressed was new, but the looking in that mirror is sobering for its complete vision. I see this as Greta Gerwig's most successful effort yet. Kelly,
I'm so disappointed in you right now.
that I get that a lot.
I just had like in my mind that we weren't gonna have to talk about Barbie tonight.
Oh, okay.
I specifically hated the direction. I don't think she was robbed of a nomination. I think she didn't deserve the nomination. I think the world building and the producing was phenomenal. I thought the script missed a lot of opportunities. Very feminism 101.
If people looking at the show would be like, okay, Jonathan the boy is probably going to be in the Oppenheimer camp and the girls are probably going to like Barbie. And here we are, all at number 8 here. All this is flipped.
That was the, I think, only movie of Greta Gerwig's I've ever seen. I have no interest now.
Here, she went balls to the wall, and I appreciate the balls to the wall aspect of it. I got a lot out of it thematically. It's a big swing, and to me, I can see it missing, but to me, it hit. Thalia?
I loved it. But I will say the first time I saw it, I shrugged because there was so much hype, and I thought, am I missing something? My kid loves it, which means we've now watched it 20 times. And every time I watch it, I like it more and I catch new things.
The script, I didn't evaluate it as a 3-act structure script like I normally might. It's its own beast. My minor issues were with some heavy-handedness. And maybe that's the feminism 101 thing that you were talking about.
No, there were a couple supporting actors who were a little, now that I'm re-engaging with it. I mean, look, Margot Robbie was fantastic. Ryan Gosling was fantastic.
All right. Numeral 7. Little Spanglish there. First is Thalia. What is your number 7 film, 2023?
Nyad. I was so excited to see Jodie Foster again. I thought Annette Bening was amazing. It was also just a story that I was riveted by. And as I'm getting older too and figuring out what kinds of amazing things can you still do, I found it motivating. And oh gosh, the jellyfish and the shark, there were like weird, exciting things. But I left the movie just feeling great. Also just very moved by the movie and motivated. And gosh, I like a piece of art that does that.
I was hoping we get back to some agreement now that we're moving on up the chart, but not quite yet. You know, I didn't hate Nyad, but Nyad was one of the final one of the big things of this year was docudramas. And I'm finding there's something inherently wrong with the current state of these docudramas. For the most part, these are exceptional stories, but not really exceptional films. I think my perspective is a little bit different because I'm looking at it from a very cinematic point of view here. These are exceptional people I'm finding, but not exceptional performances. And I think the reason is they are so tied to the facts, which is commendable, that I feel like they are missing many character arcs and details. They cover them, but sometimes some of the films do it in voiceover. That we are told about something instead of feeling it on a visceral level because they got to get through the plot so quickly. They're missing the beats. Jodie Foster has a turnabout at one point, but we don't see it. She says something in hindsight. And that's just one example of many in this film and a lot of the docudramas. It's missing those important details that take a interesting story to a great film. None of the films really use the tools of the art form to dig deeper, talking about mise-en-scène. The themes of perseverance and stick-to-itiveness are really noble. I, too, was inspired by the story, but not by the film, if you understand the distinction I'm trying to make there. I thought the nominated actors were impressive from a technical point of view, like in terms of like their gait, their vocal quality, what they did to their bodies, really impressive, and I believe that, but I felt like the script probably robbed them of the opportunity to really get the emotional beats. I never believed them from that point of view. So I didn't really ever, I could always feel the acting. One thing that I did like about it is the editing. I did think that the editing did a nice job in balancing what was going on in the boat, what's going on in the water. Again, very plot heavy. I also like that they incorporated some real footage now and then, sort of embracing the docudrama status more than a lot of the other films like that this year, like Pain Hustlers, for example. I feel like they worked better when she was in the water, getting a sense of her mental state of mind. The way I would have approached this movie is focusing completely on character, or more on character anyway, immersing us inside the titular mind. So many of these films get mired in the weeds, but what really matters to me is the characters. And in this year's crop, like this film, I feel like that idea gets lost. It has some good things. I feel like I said a lot of negative things and I didn't mean to, but it was at the end of a lot of docudramas that I had watched. Kelly, anything on Nyad?
I thought the performances were really excellent, but it was too hard for me. Like, I didn't know why I was having to watch this person suffer so much. It just felt like, who cares? I don't mean to belittle.
But I think that has something to do with not focusing on characters. Like, they had a lot they needed to explain, whereas if they spent more time with the characters, the emotional investment might have been different.
Yeah, so for me, I just felt like I was watching somebody, an excellent actor, like just beat herself up over and over and over. I mean,
I wonder if that it's a first act issue almost, in the sense that what I'm hearing, and I didn't write this down, I'm off script a little bit. What I'm hearing, what you're saying is she's so tenacious, like almost like crazily tenacious, but we don't feel that. We're told it several times. Whereas if we felt that and felt that burning desire from the get go, or more in the first act, we might have been more on board. But
yeah, maybe I would have benefited from a different point of view in the script that showed me why it mattered to her.
You know, I don't know, maybe it's the background I come from, but I think I really do understand the going back to something that beats your body up, like as an athlete. You just become very single-minded. The achievement or getting to the finish line takes over whatever pain, suffering, fear could be there. You know, you're trained from a really early age that like you just don't think about those things.
I understand, like, academically, that the point is no one's done it. Like, that's the point. Like, it's about a place in history, and feeling like, especially given her history of abuse, like feeling like she wanted to be on a map, be a place in history. I did this thing because I feel less than based on all these things that happened to me in my past. I understand that academically. My issue with the film is I did not feel like it was communicated emotionally and cinematically. All right, so it's time for Kelly's number 7 film of 2023.
Bottoms. It was a fun coming of age story. It was so different. It was fun to see the women get to be really flawed, and it was really cool. I liked all the characters. I thought it became like crazy by the end, and I love that they just embraced it. I thought it was like a really fun, entertaining, clever way of telling this kind of story. Let's fight about it.
You and I are not going to fight anyway. It's not going to make my top 10 because of some smallish quibbles. It's extremely ridiculous, but also very self-aware, and leans into its silliness full throttle to make satirical points about feminism and the patriarchy, spinning high school movie tropes on their head in the process. And takes a lot of skill to be able to do that. I laughed a lot on top of it, even when it was uncomfortable, and there is a consistent and thorough exploitation of the mise-en-scène that furthered the themes. A lot of the things that I look for in movies. And I also appreciate that satires are so rare nowadays. One of the ones in the most recent years, it's also kind of silly, but almost in a dark way, is the film Sorry to Bother You, I think from 2018. And this sort of harkened back to that in a similar way, I think. The actors are all pretty good, though most of them play one-dimensional roles. But in a satire, that often makes sense. Again, judging it on its own merits. It's kind of its own beast in that regard. So I'm not looking for 3-act structure of a script or the dimension of the characters. They're allegories to some degree. I couldn't help but feeling that they were both too old for their roles.
They were, and
given the lack of verisimilitude in the tone overall, maybe it doesn't matter, but didn't sit quite right for me the whole time. I admired it a lot, but didn't quite love it. The great satires of all time, MASH, Putney Swope, etc., all took themselves a little more seriously than this. The last act that you're talking about, where it starts to veer into Zucker Brothers parody film territory, that didn't sit as right with me because it sort of steered away from the skewering that I was sensing throughout most of the film. Like, and I just want to be clear, this is a small quibble.
Well, because it was a satire, it didn't matter to me that they were both clearly in their mid-20s.
But also some of the other cast didn't match them too, to some degree.
It didn't bother me, though.
And I think I said in my notes that it may not matter given the nature of the piece and the tone of the piece. Yeah. But I was consistently aware of it, so it mattered in terms of my perception for sure, which is, all that I'm referring to. And I appreciate what it was trying to do. When you do a tone so heightened, it's hard to be as on point. And this is where we're going to disagree about, like, Barbie. I do think it chose this tone, and everything was in line with that tone. And here it chose a heightened tone, very wild, very fun. And then the third act, especially, it went a little sideways on the tone, a little bit, but just enough. I keep saying top 20. I'm going to be top 25 anyway. I didn't go past 10, but I definitely like the film a lot. Talia, any chance you saw Bottoms?
I didn't see it. Sorry.
All right, so it's time for my number 7. And given what we've talked about already, it sounds like I'm going to get beat up on this one a little bit. Because my number 1 films, if you've watched the show, my number 1 films over the last 2 years consecutively have been considered animated films. But that trend will come to an end this year as the only animated film in my top 10 falls here. I feel like the buzz in this film has been less than stellar, even though it did get a Best Animated Film nomination. But for me, I found Elemental extremely charming. They seem to take more time with the scripts for a lot of these animated films because there's such an elegance to the structure, which is fundamentally sound without ever feeling like it. I often tell my students to be structured in their scripts, but to hide it. And Elemental, to me, did that very successfully, combined with some nice imagery and clever ideas. I was surprised to hear it was getting some negative reviews. I grant you that its theme of inclusion is a little on the nose, but somehow, almost unfortunately, very relevant. The allusions to Ellis Island and immigration in general are hardly subtle, but I found them very effective. But surprisingly, however, its approach towards relationship is heartbreakingly honest, almost unknowingly, addressing issues related to modern masculinity and femininity. There's a minor cop-out in the last act, I felt. Another example of a movie aimed towards kids that dared to flirt with tragedy and pulled back at the last minute in a mostly disingenuous way. But probably the right choice for some reasons. I would have been interested if they'd chosen the darker path. Other than that, I found the film really touching with an excellent wholeness of world. I really, really loved Elemental. Thalia, any chance you saw Elemental?
Yeah, I did see it, and I really didn't like it. I felt exactly like you said, it was kind of on the nose, too much on the nose. I just was bored, I think. Frankly, I think that in some ways kids are smarter. I think
your kid's smarter.
I always want them to make movies that ask kids to do a bit more work.
That's exactly what I was saying over the last couple of years. I disagree. I mean, I felt like when I say on the nose, I felt like a little, like, you know what I mean? Like, and it sounds like you're thinking a lot. I certainly disagree from that point of view. I felt like there was more to it than just the issues of immigration. The layering is what I appreciate. Kelly talks about the films that bring her joy, and this is one of the ones that brought me a lot of joy. So I just really appreciated it from a craft and thematic point of view. I was never bored. I was like riveted and completely immersed in this world. I truly loved it. We're at the next echelon to me in my top 10, once we jump into number 8. This is a special film to me. Kelly, Elemental.
I did not like it, and I was bored. I can see why people will like it. I did think the animation was lovely. No.
All the Leo talk, I sensed I was going to get dumped on when it came to Elemental. I like what I like. What can I say? Like, and it, even at the end of the year, it still stands out to me, and I can't wait to rewatch it. Number 6, moving right along here. Let's see. Thalia, you are first. Your number 6 film of 2023.
Yeah, I just finished this movie like an hour before we started. I finished Killers of the Flower Moon. I really enjoyed it. I learned so much. This was like a piece of history that I knew literally nothing about. I was very surprised to like this movie as much as I did. I really found myself very into it.
So one thing I can tell you for sure is that Killer of the Flower Moon is my number 11 film of 2023. I just bumped it the last week or so. I liked it a lot. On a lot of the craft level, I decided on a lot of these other films because of the emotional engagement. I'm struggling to say things that I didn't like about it because there weren't that many, but I'm also trying to justify knocking it off my top 10. Your number 6 out of 36 and my number 11 out of 103. The ratio might be pretty similar there. So maybe I don't have to explain myself too much. I thought the acting, my favorite part about it was the performances across the board. I mean, we talked about Nolan not being a great director of actors from my point of view, but Scorsese clearly is. And I say this all the time. It's so hard to play not intelligent. Because actors have to be intelligent. Playing a lack of intelligence is really hard, and he does it very, very well. One of the things Kelly and I talk about is not to judge our characters. He does terrible, terrible things, but still manages, from my point of view, to have a lot of empathy for this character and his portrayal. Scorsese, as a director, knows exactly what to shoot and when. The shot design, shot choices are really strong. I almost never use this as an excuse. I did feel like it was too long. Some people just say, like, look at the runtime and decide it's too long. Like, it should have ended. It had too much. It had unnecessary, superfluous things, from my point of view. Too long in that sense. Like, it could have been leaner and meaner and still communicated a lot of the same things. Minor quibbles. 11 is really good. So I don't, I'm struggling, like I said, to find negative things. But these are the smallest reasons why I opted to go with something else in my top 10 here. Kelly, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, it just back on Leonardo DiCaprio's performance. He slowed down his thought process. It was really excellent. And I think a lot of people playing dumb would miss that. And he would just really think through things. It was really, I really liked his performance. Lily Gladstone was great. Hearing you talk about it made me like it more. it was 45 minutes too long. Like we could have cut so much. And I felt like it was a little indulgent, or like maybe grandpa is trying to tell me this is what cinema is. So like pay attention. And it's like, yeah, but you could have told a story in less time. I'm fine with a long movie if it needs to be that long.
During the movie, I was thinking, do we need that scene? Do we need that sequence? I mean, you use the number 45, I use the number 20. So, but I completely agree. Some of my favorite movies are long movies. If you are going to have that 3-hour running time, you need to earn it. And I'm not sure it completely did. Even the scenes that were unnecessary were good scenes, a lot of them. To your point, they weren't advancing the exact plot. There were details. And I love what you said about Grandpa telling me what cinema is, because he has been, a little bit get off my lawn recently. His films were leaner and meaner when he had a studio that he had to beg money to do his artistic project. And so he had to keep it lean and mean. Now he's Marty Scorsese on a pedestal, and I'm Marty Scorsese. I'll make it as long as I want. You just try and stop me. And he's in that rarefied air. Quentin Tarantino, there are other directors. Nolan is at that place, and I know you guys love Oppenheimer, so whatever. But
we can still agree that he's at that place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indulgence is a great word. There's no one to tell him no. And I think all that makes me appreciate, for all his flaws, makes me appreciate Spielberg more, who still cares about his audience to be aware that scenes are unnecessary. It's not about him. So, I feel like this has been a little too negative about Kills of the Flower Moon. I did like so much of it, especially cinematically. We've talked a lot, Thalia, so this is your chance to rebut.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts are that, it was like one movie, but there were maybe 4 genres that were played with in it. And I don't know if you could have done as much of that work if it were shorter. And also I was trying to think about what you would cut. And one of my favorite scenes was the radio play.
No, I like that. It was like a lot of films would do like a scroll epilogue or something, and I think that was in place of that, and I appreciated that. I wish Marty didn't appear in it himself. That Kelly's indulgent.
That was unnecessary.
So anyway, all right. So that's Killers of the Flower Moon. It looks like that's the only time that's going to appear tonight. Kelly, you're number 6.
No hard feelings. I liked the script. I liked the story. I thought it was, an interesting twist on, having to move on and grow up. I just felt like I was watching and enjoying a film. On
New Year's Day every year, that's when I start to really focus on this project. I'll make my first pass at a top 10 based on what I've seen. I probably saw like 58 of the 103 by that day. And so on that day, I had no hard feelings in my top 10. And, as you watch more movies, it slips further and further down. It's funny what my notes say, because it ties us back to Champions, in the sense I wrote, the script is as formulaic as they come. You can feel the structure in a very unnatural way, but the 2 leads are so darn committed and charming, it pretty much works enough anyway. It's the kind of movie that overcomes the formulaic nature, makes you remember why you love formula. I didn't remember I wrote that, but it's exactly speaking to what you were saying about Champions, although I seem to like this one a little more. Jennifer Lawrence, it's a new dimension in terms of the level of the comedy, almost making fun of herself. I really appreciate it. It's a really good comic performance. Andrew Barth, I thought was excellent. I look forward to seeing what he does next. Plus, they have a really good chemistry. The relationship is very believable and key to the movie. The jokes aren't super funny. They're mildly amusing, but there are enough of them. A lot of the supporting characters are thin, so there's some flaws, but it keeps a smile on my face the entire time. There's one power moment in the middle of the film that they completely earned. Real emotion, well executed. To me, thematically, it's all about growing up. No matter what age you are, moving on and coping seem to be a key part of the process, not letting the past hold you back. I think there's also something about age as just a number, about how friendships can happen across all age groups, even though we often close ourselves off to people of different generations. Both of those things landed pretty nicely. So despite a handful of hiccups, I can't help but feel this was a very successful effort. I want to see if Thalia's seen No Hard Feelings.
I did see it. I thought it was a fine movie. I didn't love it, but I will say that it was just very simple in the best possible way, that I could just sit and enjoy the movie.
And it sounds like we're saying variations on a lot of the same things. It's hard to pull off all those things that we're talking about, whether it's Champions or this film. It is a challenging thing to pull off. Like, even though, the script is formulaic and you don't want to feel the formula. I felt it here, but it was really still fun and enjoyable and still smart and thematically successful. Kelly, any rebuttal?
No, I agree.
I think it's time for my number 6. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So story time a little bit. So I don't know if Kelly remembers this, but she got me drunk on Thanksgiving. She, against my better judgment, got me to reveal how much I love this film. Kelly, you know where I'm going?
Oh my God, yeah, I do. I'm so happy and also disappointed in myself.
Tell the audience what I'm about to say.
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes turned out to be a visceral, powerful, very believable portrait of how good intentions can corrupt someone, how evil is born. This is the movie that Star Wars The Phantom Menace wanted to be. Also a prequel about the making of a villain. Its success has a large part to do with the star-making, tour-de-force performance of Tom Blythe. Nobody seemed to tell him he was doing a YA action film. He thought he was playing a three-dimensional character, and his work is a lesson to any actor that doesn't take these roles as seriously. The way his goals and his fears intertwine are delicately apparent and undeniably human, a portrait created with empathy and intelligence. Director Francis Lawrence and his editing team keep things moving in an engaging way, but isn't afraid to allow moments to breathe when needed. It's that balance of rhythm and release that many filmmakers cannot seem to figure out. All that is enough to overcome Rachel Zegler, who struggles to be believable whenever she's not singing. All in all, it's an exciting, smart, and surprisingly deeply felt film that is relevant and honest in spite of its YA sci-fi roots. Kelly, I know you've seen Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Yeah, I kind of forgot to put it on my list. I agree with a lot of what you said. I was just really bummed by
Rachel Zegler.
Yeah, like did not care for her performance.
So it sounds like we're in agreement on that too.
Yeah, he was excellent. I imagine he did a lot of prep and has a different type of technique. I felt like she just was getting from song to song.
100%. Thalia, any chance you saw Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
No, but now I want to put it on the list. Fox and I have seen the Hunger Games movies, but I honestly just assumed this would be bad. And
I did too. Like I saw it because I see everything. Like I try to make a point to see as much as I can. I was blown away, and Kelly got me to talk about it Thanksgiving. Thankfully, she forgot because she was drunk.
Yeah, I did. I was so excited when I saw it. I texted my sister. I was like, dude, there's a new Hunger Games. Like, we got to go.
Everyone I've talked to has been like, I can't believe how good that, like, are surprised at how good it was. And I think that I think the message to filmmakers out there, like that I really wanted to get across is how much more successful it was than the Star Wars prequels. Like, it's exactly what we wanted those Star Wars prequels to be in terms of how Darth Vader became Darth Vader, with character development and pain. We talk all the time when we're working with actors, hurt people. We saw his pain deeply rooted. Like, you have empathy for him for a lot of the movie, and you could understand how he went in that direction. It's unfortunate, and he had a choice. Hopefully a lot of us wouldn't make that choice, but it took the time. The character beats that I'm complaining about all these other films, almost more points for being like good action, but also good character work. That's why it's so high on my list. It's the upper half of the list now. Here we go. Number 5, top 5 films of 2023. Kelly, you are up first.
American Fiction. Like, it was really informative to me, and like the exploration of like stereotype and as an artist and like selling your art, like the layers of like how we view and what we expect from each other as an artist, how that impacts how people see us separate from the art and as part of the art. I enjoyed like the intellectual challenge of having to think those things through a little more than I have. I don't think it was perfect. Some of the script was just a little
disjointed.
Yeah. I liked it a lot, obviously.
When I say these films are like top 20 for me, it means because I was seriously considering them for the top 10. So, like, I feel like I keep saying it, but I've also watched double the amount of films that, so maybe that, again, ratio-wise, it's okay. So, I wrote that American Fiction is an effective and thorough, soft satire that is uncomfortably funny, droll, intelligent, and interesting. I think director and writer Cord Jefferson did a super job finding and maintaining this tone. It's a very tricky thing to pull off, and I love what Jeffrey Wright does. His usual brilliant self, finding not only character, but the mocked version of himself, his other half, as it were. 2 little bumps for me, one of which you talked about a little bit. I'm not sure the script or the edit found the right balance between the family dynamics and the racial satire. I can see why it was important to include both. They were back and forth at the wrong times. The narrative thrust was lost. I'm glad they didn't sacrifice the character development. That goes back to my complaints about Bottoms. It's an issue of ratio, like a recipe that uses a tad too much salt. The other thing that bumped for me, this is going to be very unpopular, because I hear from friends and colleagues that he's a super sweet, hardworking guy, but I really don't believe Sterling K. Brown as a drug-addled, recently gay man dealing with childhood trauma any more than I did him as a body-obsessed father in Waves. I continually bump for him, although I hear he's like the super sweetest guy. I don't buy him, and I don't see range from him, especially in scenes with Jeffrey Wright, who's, to me, clearly so much stronger. Thalia, any chance you've seen American Fiction?
I loved this movie. And I think the thing that you felt was disjointed, this idea of a Black story. And I think that the stuff going on with the family shows that like Black story is also a human story, a mother dealing with dementia, losing family and grief. There are things that are unique about different people's experiences, and then there are also the things that we are all going to go through. We're going to lose parents. We're going to take care of sick parents. We're going to lose siblings. I also love the satire and just the, frankly, making fun of writers.
Just to clarify, I wasn't so much commenting on the inclusion of both of these elements. It's really about an issue of balance. And that's why I wondered, too, Kelly was talking about the script, and in my notes, I talked about the script or the edit, because I'm not sure at what point that happened, because I feel like it's an issue of, and again, this is a top 20 film, so this is the small quibbles that keep it out of the top 10. There were two different things, which is fine, but it was like, at one point, when we're doing satire, and then like it's a sharp right turn at times, and I feel like they lost some of that rhythm in the edit. It's a delicate thing.
I do think there were some pacing issues. I mean, he somehow writes a book so incredibly quickly, and then it comes out so quickly.
Not editing pacing issues, but believability within the diegesis about the way things transpire.
Yes. But I also wondered if some of that was editing, and I could not tell at a certain point, like, was more time going by than I thought was going by? Or
I agree, but it's also easily solved with, like, they could have just jumped months and made it work, and they chose not to.
Yes, I think it was an editing fail.
I actually, in general, really do like Sterling K. Brown's work, but I do feel like he was miscast. I didn't feel like he was fully comfortable in it, so I could feel him trying to do the part.
Yeah,
just a little like tension of it.
Moving on to Talia's number 5, I believe. Talia, what do you got?
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. Was very worried about an adaptation of it, and I loved everything about it. It was so charming, and Kathy Bates was great in that role. I think this is the kind of movie that kids my daughter's age could see, and again, open up conversations. Overall, I thought it was a great movie too, though, not just the lessons and all.
Kelly, have you seen Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Yes, I did see it. It's not my kind of movie, so it's like hard to evaluate it, I guess. Like, I didn't really like it. I was a little bored in it.
I'm the oldest here. Batalia's in between, so maybe there's the generational thing there as well, potentially. Because do you read a lot of Judy Blume by chance as a kid? Just out of curiosity. Okay. All right. So it's time for my number 5, and I doubt these guys have seen this film, which will make this quick. Like John Carney's other films, Once and Sing Street, Flora and Son is structurally obvious, emotionally naive, a technical disaster, and yet my heart was soaring for weeks afterwards. He's like the Irish Cameron Crowe. And like Crowe, it's pretty much about the music. Admittedly, the songs are not as successful as they were in the previous 2 films, though Meet in the Middle, I think, should have had an Oscar nod. But the film is so much stronger. And what this film has that the others don't is a fully realized performance at its center. Eve Hewson has arrived, fulfilling the promise she showed glimpses of in small roles over the years. Her performance reminds me of Bria Veneta from the Florida Project, if Bria Veneta were an actual actor. A tremendous performance. I think it just makes the movie so much more deep than a lot of John Carney's other work. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is so darn charming that it's almost disgusting in a good way. The technical flaws that manifest themselves in ways that tend only to appear in films with a smaller budget. Obvious continuity errors, sloppy edits, awkward blocking, uninspired visuals. It's like Carney still doesn't quite understand the logistical side of film production. He's too focused on the story and his music, but the story is the main thing. And that's what my main takeaway for me of the film is, and all his films, is a deep love for music in general and its potential of its power to connect, to heal, to feel, and to love. And by extension, that's a love of the potential of art in general, which moves me in immeasurable ways. So often, audiences take their art for granted, mindlessly consuming it to alleviate boredom, seldom allowing themselves to feel the heart of what the experience is, to understand its connection to the human experience. Perhaps a film like this can cut through the hardened, cynical shells that so many of us put up. I was deeply, deeply moved by Flora and Son. Kelly, any chance you saw Flora and Son?
Yeah, I really liked it. I only bumped it off my top 10 in the last 30 minutes before we got on.
Oh, wow. Is that close? So can you say with confidence it's your number 11 film of 2023?
Yeah.
I'll take it. Talia, Flora and Son.
Didn't see.
So that means we can move on. All right, time for number 4. And number 4, let's see who gets to go first here. I think it's Talia, but let me check my script. It is Talia, your number 4 film of 2023.
The Holdovers. Oddly enough, when I started it, I thought, I'm not as into this. By the end, I thought maybe it was my favorite movie.
It's not.
Because I struggled to be as interested as I wanted to be in the beginning. I think as soon as the majority of the boys left and the story really focused on the smaller group, I became so deeply invested in the relationships and the connection. back 2/3 of the movie, my heart really loves a small movie that's about personal dynamics. And this was such a wonderful, strange group of characters put together that I just adored it.
I am middle of the road on The Holdovers. In fairness, I've never been an Alexander Payne guy. Like, the majority of his films historically have left me pretty cold. In spite of that, I've always been keenly aware of his awareness of film history, but it's never been as obvious a part of his films as it is here. And because of the time period and to some degree the anti-authority perspective, he chooses to incorporate that into the stylization of this film. But I'm not sure how much it added thematically. I do think it's pretty solid structurally. It's definitely about something. I understood what the film wanted to say, but I find myself intrigued, but mostly numb. I don't know what that lack of emotional engagement says about his approach, but I wonder what could be in any of his pieces if he had made or will make an adjustment on that front. Like, the scripts, whether he writes them or not, are often layered, so the potential is high, but I don't feel like he ever actualizes that potential. It's almost too dry. Didn't feel strongly about it one way or the other. I didn't hate it like Oppenheimer, but I didn't feel it on a visceral level, and I didn't feel the performances were bad, but I didn't feel like they were special or significant either. So I really got right in the middle on all elements of the film. But I appreciate the structure. I appreciate it is well made on some degree, but I didn't feel it. Kelly, The Holdovers.
Yeah, I know a lot of people really like it. I thought it was okay. For me, it was like, I don't think I'll ever think about it again.
There was sort of Great Heart. It did move me emotionally. I also kept thinking that maybe it was a story that would have been better told as a short story. I love the idea of it, a campus that's empty and 3 very different people are all together and they take an adventure.
You know, if it affected you emotionally, then it's doing something right. It just didn't affect me that way. Like, but the converse is Elemental. I was bawling at Elemental in a theater. So it's such a personal thing, and that is the point of having, like, me not doing a show by myself. Kelly, your number 4 film of 2023.
Okay, I feel like now's the time. You know, it's Jules. I really loved it. I thought it was really sweet and unique. It's not something I normally would have watched. I love watching older actors. It's such a treat to watch them.
What is the name of the film?
Jules?
Jeuels?
Jules? Did you
I-
not watch it?
I've never even heard of it.
With Ben Kingsley?
There it is. I see it on the list. It's on Paramount Plus. Okay. I didn't see it and I did not remember it and have not heard much about it. So tell me about it. I don't even know.
Oh yeah, no, it's really sweet. It's in this small town and there's this old lonely man and one day like a UFO crashes in his yard. Like, it's absurd, and he slowly befriends this alien and it becomes a secret. It was just like really lovely.
And you're 57 and Talia's 32. If you've both seen Jules and I haven't, then I'm gonna.
I haven't heard of it. But I want to watch it now.
Since we haven't seen that, we can go right along. That's a recommendation for those of you that also haven't heard of it. You can check out Jules. I've been getting a little frustrated over the course of the evening with these 2 ladies ganging up on me. I guess it stands to reason, different genders, different perspectives and things like that. But that, like, there's been so much disagreement. It's usually I've been the bad guy over the course of the evening. But now Talia and I get to gang up on Kelly a little bit. My number 4 film is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Hey.
Oh.
It's interesting that it tends to be the movies that I'm initially resistant to that rise to the top of these lists. Director Kelly Freeman Craig finally fulfills the promise that she showed glimpses of in The Edge of 17. Every shot in Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, I think is perfectly orchestrated to hit all the beats of comedy, all the beats of drama, all the beats of pathos, and all the beats of youthful confusion. It's an excellent balancing act that she didn't quite nail with that previous movie, Edge of 17, but the more tested, assured source material may have provided her with the safety net that she required. The performances are wonderful across the board, with the possible exception of the continually awkward Benny Safdie as the father. Abby Ryder-Fortson, however, is exquisite as young Margaret, a real find. Talia called out Kathy Bates. For me, Rachel McAdams is the performance of this movie. She has grown into quite a capable talent, and she has a couple transcendent moments in this film that you wouldn't quite expect. What's particularly special about the piece to me is that it's not just about blossoming womanhood, though I'm told that aspect is painfully accurate. It's also an insightful and powerful exploration of the role organized religion has in our daily lives. In its own way, it highlights the difference between religion and faith, and also suggests the toxic way the religion can be used, but doesn't need to be. If I were nitpicky, I might suggest that it could have gone even further into the positive side of religion, the solace, comfort, and peace some folks get from their respective faiths. One might walk away from the film feeling atheism is the answer, which it may be for Margaret, but it doesn't need to be for everyone. Still, this is a much more complex and important film that many YA films would ever dare to be. I think it's pitch perfect on the basic directing and storytelling elements, and then extremely effective on the thematic elements as well. Thalia, we have some crossover.
Yeah, Fox is going to be excited about that one too.
Kelly.
Yeah, Rachel McAdams was fabulous. It could just be personal bias. Like, I don't have a relationship with my mom, so maybe I just instinctively like don't want to engage in those.
I'm going to move on, guys. Everybody good?
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Jumping up a notch to number 3, our top 3 films of 2023. These are big. Kelly, your number 3 film of 2023.
You're going to be disappointed to hear, but it is Oppenheimer.
We've talked a lot about it.
Yeah, I think going and like having the 70 millimeter IMAX experience really probably influenced it. I thought the sound design was really spectacular. I liked most of the acting. I just felt like I was watching a movie.
A very common thing with these biopics is I do feel like they cover too much ground. If this was a movie just about the trial or just about the making of the bomb, I think it might have had a lot more impact. I'm not complaining about the technical marvels of it. I tell my students that filmmaking is like making a cake. There are layers. And to me, that very bottom layer, and hopefully as a writer, Thalia, appreciate it, the very bottom layer has got to be story. The next layer, and this is where students most get wrong, the next layer has got to be the acting. And most students, film students anyway, don't get that. Because if you don't believe the people you're watching, then the whole thing topples. But the story's got to be there. And I feel like if the foundation of the cake is too wide, that's another reason it's going to topple. So to me, it tried to cover too much ground. It was a little too ambitious. I wasn't hooking into any of it.
Yeah, because I'm normally with you. I don't enjoy biopics unless they're like taking a specific slice of time. It felt like a history, like a historical fiction, like retelling to me. So I wasn't like consuming it in my mind as a biopic.
And I still feel like I was watching 2 separate movies that weren't necessarily linking. Thalia, you're number 3.
Barbie.
Another crossover for you and me.
I'm trying to figure out what to say about Barbie that hasn't been said, but I think one of the things I love the most about it was sort of the references to other movies that I recognize, movies that I really love, Gene Kelly movies. Again, truly, every time I'm watching it, I feel like I'm hearing new things, taking in new things. I like Barbie on so many levels. It reached kids and adults, and I think the message was quite palatable.
Obviously, I'm a fan. I have to say, though, this is funny. I had Barbie at 8, and Thalia had Oppenheimer at 8, and now Kelly has Oppenheimer at 3. Thalia has Barbie at 3. So these films continue to be weirdly intertwined, even on our top 10. Kelly, do you have anything you'd like to add or subtract?
Yeah, I feel like I've said what I need to say.
I saw a lot of craft and intelligence and world building that I like. And I think that's an accomplishment.
Not and disagree. I think the world building and like the costuming like was incredible.
So cool. My number 3 is another small little film these guys probably didn't see, so maybe we'll get through it quickly. And I don't know if any other movie from 2023 actually changed the trajectory of my life the way this one did. Both of my co-hosts are aware how 2023 nearly destroyed me emotionally. And I have been in a tailspin the latter half of last year and into the beginning of this year. And for all the coping work I've been trying to do, it wasn't until experiencing this movie that I started to wake up feeling like myself again. The movie is called Memory from director Michel Franco. The movie is a lot of greatness, but also just an emotional challenge to experience that could be triggering for many. The direction exquisitely favors the performances, a lot of static wides that lets the action play out sans coverage. It seemed the right choice for this private look into the lives of very damaged people. It's heartening to know how damaged people can find each other in the hopes of possibly healing together. This film is about the state of being broken, coping with that whenever possible. The title makes me reflect on the power we give the past, but also, interestingly, in this film anyway, how it can also be sometimes untrustworthy. We are defined by our past, but what if our memory is an unreliable narrator in some cases? We've talked before, especially with Kelly, I think, about the relationship between identity and memory. But does it need to be that way? And that's not to belittle the pain of the abuse the characters experienced, but it does become the weight we assign those memories in our respective identities. As I said, the film's a lot, and perhaps too much. I can't say it's an enjoyable watch, but it is very skillful and carefully executed. Jessica Chastain is once again wonderful as one of the many shattered individuals, and it's an extremely carefully modulated performance. Peter Sarsgaard is also extremely strong, as you might expect, though is often without clothes to the point of feeling excessive. Merritt Weaver, too. Excellent nuance work, communicating so much in silences and glares, looks across the room. It's perhaps one of the finest ensembles of the year. I was a mess after watching this film, and I had the feeling like it was going to stick with me all day, if not longer. But I suppose that's only if I let it. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got Memory as my number 3 film of 2023. Kelly, did you see Memory by chance?
No, but I really want to. I've never even heard of it.
Talia, any chance you saw Memory?
No, I didn't see it, but it's been on my list of things I would like to see.
You have heard of it at least?
I have. Yeah.
Are you kids ready to move on to number 2?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Number 2, as promised. All right, our top 2 films. This is crazy. We're going to do our favorite 2 films of the year. Unbelievable. Talia, what is your number 2 film of 2023?
Okay, I'd like to preface, if I can, I've been back and forth, and I'm still not entirely sure between 1 and 2. But at this moment, what I'm sharing is number 2 is Past Lives. Yeah. I love this movie since I saw it. I'm not in a very romantic place these days. And so to feel so invested in a love story and care so much about a love story, it sort of cracked me open in a way I didn't know was possible at this moment in time. It was beautiful, and I find that I'm recommending it to people all the time. And I think one of my greatest disappointments is that most people haven't heard of it.
I did not enjoy Past Lives. It's very lyrical and almost poetic from a filmmaking point of view. It's interesting that it affected you emotionally because it actually left me very cold, possibly because of that choice. We had too much distance, I think, almost from its characters. I was thinking that maybe it might have been more interesting dramaturgically if we didn't see the past at all. With all that information that came out of the present, we as an audience would have been working more to get a sense of their connection. The film references Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which not only pretty much does exactly what I just recommended, but also features the other thing this film lacks, and that's a rooting interest. I sensed John Magaro's insecurities and fears, but the other characters were more standoffish, possibly in a way that aligns with cultural divides. Me as an audience member, John Magaro's excellent performance provided insight where the others felt more guarded, not to just to each other, but to us. I wasn't getting to know them. And in the performances, and in all fairness, you know, and I think Talia knows this, I don't know if Kelly does, Greta Lee, the lead in this movie, I have directed her. I have worked with her. I've directed her in our web series Intersection, you know, in 2009. I know her. She's a fine actor. There's nothing issue. It's just in this movie, and it's the overall tone of this movie. This is the style of the director, Celine Song, to keep this distance, which works in a film that I just talked about, Memory. It keeps that distance, but the emotions are so big in these big traumatic moments that they're doing, the distance works. I don't know it works here because I feel like she almost overdoes it. The walking in silence, for example, at the end, it's just too long. It's almost onomastic. That's just an example of what I'm talking about. I understood the echo, this thing from the past. At a certain point, it becomes stylized and less evocative than she thinks. Again, my point of view. The word that comes to mind, I think I've used it a lot tonight, is balance. It's a balance between that non-manipulative approach and maybe giving us a little more insight into their emotions. So I think it's a nice, sweet movie. And while its flaws are small, they add up and were enough to prevent me from connecting. And I'll let you rebut in a moment when I give Kelly a chance. Past Lives.
I thought all the acting was really good. It's probably one of my least favorite movies. I can tell that the director made a lot of very specific choices that supported the vision that they had, but I didn't enjoy the direction. It's a personal story for her that she wrote and directed, and I feel like she's so close to it that the trap is you're not able to pull back.
There's no perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like she then analyzed her own work. So it feels at times like indulgent or like wandery. You're just stretching something out too far, like the dough.
We have a lot of coloring references, you and I, tonight. Me with the salt and and yet neither of us cook, so I don't understand why.
I boil artichokes.
It's true.
So I'm sorry I didn't like it.
It feels like what you're saying is almost like exactly what I'm saying, I think, to some degree, just different words. I think, so it comes back to balance. What I think the difference in what you and I are saying is I'm deducting less points for that than you are, I think, to some degree.
Like it just felt like it was never going to end.
I think the things that you both didn't like, maybe I did like. The pacing and sort of the distance of it felt like the tone of the movie, of the relationships, the sort of waiting they were experiencing. And I guess I felt like I was able to connect with it from an emotional place in the way the story was being told.
It's definitely consistent in that regard. I think I've used the word hodgepodge for other movies, but this was definitely consistent in that. I just don't sure if it worked. But Thalia, we'll always have Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That we'll always have that.
Sure.
Kelly, your number 2 film of 2023.
Yeah, it's Poor Things. I actually thought it did what Barbie wanted to do, but better. It approached feminism and the patriarchy better. I really loved like the creativity and the style. I thought Emma Stone was so clear where she was at all times and how she mapped out her progress. I thought there were a few missteps, which is probably why it's not my number 1. I felt like there were a few missed tonal moments, and some of the story pacing went kind of wonky for me sometimes. I thought the costuming was fantastic. I loved the exploration and the themes. I thought the script was entertaining. I loved it.
I mostly didn't like it, but mainly I just don't like Yorgos Lanthimos as a director. Like none of it. Favorite, hated, like Lobster. We did a review of Lobster in episode 66.2. Not into it. My notes here for Poor Things are simultaneously imaginative and derivative, which I guess is fine. But once again, Lanthimos ruins extremely rich material with his obsequious and unnecessary style. I actually have it as one of the best scripts of the year. And I do have Emma Stone as the best actress of 2023 for that tour de force performance.
Yeah.
That Lanthimos inserting himself into this film with the fisheye lens, the use of color, these framing ideas, doesn't feel like it's driven by the narrative. To me, it's on an astic direction and a distraction. It's almost an obsessive need by the director to be the center of the show. There were a lot of ideas, to your point, that were extremely relevant. The filmmaking and world building didn't bring more of that out. It almost drowned it out by calling attention to itself. I think the rather clever, detailed screenplay and as the aforementioned performance by Emma Stone do a lot to counteract this, makes the film watchable, but to me, not really rewatchable. I think Emma Stone's creation of Bella is extremely creative and thought out, intelligent and relatable, and funny and as close to touching as the film gets. Which brings us to, I think, the deeper problem. Lanthimos' style consistently prevents emotional engagement because, again, it's these bells and whistles.
I agree. I hate the fisheye lens and this one,
Yeah, the iris.
So I agree that was unnecessary. It's it's not my number 1 for a reason. But I thought despite that, like the script was so good. Emma Stone specifically was like phenomenal. That to me outweighed. Like I could look past that stuff. And I was still able to be moved.
It's interesting with Past Lives because it was about weight. We had similar quibbles, but it's about the weight that we attach to them. Here, I'm saying this director of the film is getting in the way. I want a director of the film to make choices that underscore the themes. He's creating this world, and that's great. There's something to that skill, but it didn't always belong here. And he was doing things that didn't add to that, where the script, I have it as top 5 script. I really do. It's a really carefully modulated screenplay. To me, the job of a director is to serve the material, not for the material to serve the director. Time for my number 2 film. Moments into this film, Timothée Chalamet slides down and around a flagpole in his new city of Paris, and I was almost immediately hooked to Wonka. To me, Wonka has everything. The visuals are breathtaking, magical, and consistent from a world-building point of view. The actors all understand the tone and execute it believably with just the right balance of comedy and pathos. That's not even to mention the success of pretty much all the voices in the film, at least to a layman's ear. Which brings me to the songs themselves, which owe a derivative debt to Leslie Bricuse's work from the 70s, but in a self-aware way. But they are also different enough to stand on their own and pretty much be fun and communicate the story ideas that they need to. This, to me, is how musical theater should be done. But most importantly, this is a film about something. Where the original story was a borderline threat to children and the rewards that come from good behavior, and vice versa, this iteration is significantly more inspirational. This is a film that captures and lionizes the entrepreneurial spirit without shying away from the challenges and pitfalls there within. It is also a condemnation of the loopholes in capitalism that allows for potential collusion and monopolies. It's about bullies, but a more realistic adult financial type of bully. I understand that sounds like a lot in a movie made for children, but as we talked about in this show, but it's a valid, ultimately positive message wrapped in cotton candy colors and an imaginative, creative team. Even if the real world business elements feel too heavy for you, you could argue that it's just about the power of dreams, but in a way that's not forced or condescending like some other films. They felt Elemental was, I didn't. Willie's ups and downs feel realistic in spite of the expressionistic surroundings and tone. which makes this not only a movie for everyone, from my point of view, but a more responsible film for children than most, to me, someone without children. To me, it's realistic without losing its sense of heart or sense of humor. Thalia.
Hated this movie. All the amazing things that Gene Wilder brought to the original, Timothée Chalamet lacked. I didn't think the singing was good enough. I actually didn't like the songs. I thought the best songs were the old songs. There was something in the original that made me a little scared watching it. It was a little creepy. It was like a minor chord. And this had nothing scary, nothing really freaked me out. I don't know. I was not uncomfortable in a way that I really, frankly, want to be a little uncomfortable. In Willy Wonka, too much, it's too many ideas, it's too sparkly. I really, frankly, detested the movie.
It's one of my favorite movies I've seen in the last several years, and I disagree with pretty much everything you said. I think Timothée Chalamet is perfect. I think the issue that we're having too is, I'm looking at this as a standalone piece. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking at this. It's not a sequel, and it's not to redo. It's a brand new piece. It's original. I'm not thinking that it's going to be a rehash of the tone or themes of this other film. I'm thinking it's its own thing, and I'm appreciating what it is on that level. So that's the beginning of my rebuttal. Kelly, did you get a chance to see Wonka?
Oh yeah, and if I could, I would have those 2 hours of my life back.
Yeah.
Timothée Chalamet played one note shtick the whole time. It was not connected to anything. I don't think he had an emotional truth. Olivia Colman, who I love as an actor, was in a different movie half the time. I disagree. Like, I thought the acting tones were all over the place.
I obviously disagree with pretty much everything. And the biggest thing is the tone of the actors. Like, I just think Olivia Colman was exactly right. Those choices were spot on. I think there was so much about this movie was spot on and consistent. It's a near perfect movie to me. I was swept away, invested emotionally. I was thematically challenged. All the craft elements were excellent.
I'm sort of amazed that Wonka is going to be the one that, like, you are this passionately in favor of, and I really am this passionately against.
I think it's extremely special, and I think the audience members should at least give it a chance and decide for yourselves. And you can roast me on YouTube if you like, or but most of the people that roast me don't watch the films first. So I encourage you to watch the films first and make your own mind. Drum roll, please. It is time for our favorite film of 2023. And if you think that was intense, wait till we hate each other's number one films of 2023. So the tradition on the show is, before we reveal our number ones, we go through a quick history of our number ones historically. So dating back to 2015, Jay Money's number one film of 2015 was The Forbidden Room. Davy Joe had Creed. I had Trumbo as the number one films of 2015. 2016, Jay Money had Arrival. Drunk Davy had Silence, which was my number two film of 2016 and made my top 10 of the decade. And I had Christine as my number one film of 2016, though I later swapped it with Silence when reevaluating for my top 10 of the decade show. In 2017, Ryan had Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Devin had Call Me By Your Name. I had the film The Foreigner, which also made my top 10 of the decade. In 2018, George had Black Klansman. James had Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I had Widows, which also made my top 10 of the decade. In 2019, Alex had Honey Boy, which was also my number 6 of that year and made Alex's top 10 of the decade. Jim had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I had Ad Astra, which was also Jim's worst film of the year of 2019. In 2020, Jim had No Man Land, Devin had Sound of Metal, and I had 9 Days. In 2021, Matt Polis had The Lost Daughter, Patrick had Pig, I had Raya and the Last Dragon. Last year, Max had All Quiet on the Western Front, Mel had Tar, and I had Marcel the Shell with Shoes On as my number one film of last year. So that catches us up to the best films of 2023. And Kelly, you get to reveal yours first. What was your favorite film of 2023?
Anatomy of a Fall. I loved it. I loved the ambiguity. I loved the themes, again, like very feminist themes, and like, are women believed, how we're perceived. I thought the acting was excellent. I could go on, but I'm sure you have something to say, and then we can just keep talking about it.
I don't have a lot of negative things to say. If I were ranking the best picture nominees, this would be third. Top 15 film, potentially. It's really compelling. It's extremely detailed murder mystery that plays out mostly in a courtroom. Historically, I find courtroom dramas, they lack cinematicism. And it's as true here as most of its antecedents, like its potential namesake, Anatomy of a Murder, or even A Civil Action or Compulsion. As good as it is, I'm not sure it's better than most of those films. It's very good, though. And a film like this is only as good as the case itself, which is very good. The main thing that this has going for me is the wonderful Sandra Hüller with that exquisite performance. The shots were very nice, but not tremendously evocative, save for a few. There's a nice dolly shot in the courtroom that I thought was good. I like how the film sort of quietly maintains Daniel's perspective, but isn't obvious about it. There's some small things that I might have done differently that kept it off the top 10. It's very plot heavy. It's mostly plot, but a great plot with a strong performance at its center and character intrigue, but not necessarily character journey. Again, quibbles to keep it off the top 10, but really, really strong work. Thalia, Anatomy of a Fall.
To see it. It was on my list of movies to see. Haven't gotten there yet.
Kelly, I didn't give you much to rebut, but feel free.
I know it's plot heavy, but I also felt like it was like a really interesting character study and a look at like justice and the system and stereotypes and how we perceive things.
I like the film. It's a really good film. It wasn't as immersed. Thalia, it's your turn for your number one film of 2023.
American Fiction.
Oh,
which
that's
was
right.
Oh, yeah.
Just like I was laughing within a few minutes and just realized that I was having that pure pleasure feeling of watching a movie. And again, I think coming to it as a writer and sort of what the expectations are for writers these days and whose story can we write and selling our own stories in icky ways. And I think women were asked to tell abuse narratives, profiting off our traumas. And I loved everything about it. I don't think it was a perfect movie. It was just absolutely my favorite, though.
And its imperfections were minimal. We've talked about this. It was Kelly's number 5. I think I had some relatively positive things to say about it. There was just a couple things. We talked about Sterling K. Brown a little bit. It was about the balance between the family storyline and the satire, like, maintaining that as the edit went along, like almost. So, minor things. Both these films, I think, like they're very close to me and, in my top 20, like Anatomy falls slightly ahead of American Fiction. And the things that I have issues with them are insignificant, but enough, kind of thing. So I don't have much negative to say about it. And Kelly, we've talked about it when it was your number 5. Do you have anything else?
No, I just, it's a really great film.
Chances are you guys have not even seen my number 1 film of 2023. And I alluded this to when we went out last night, but the Independent Spirit Awards have different eligibility rules than the Oscars. So it often happens that films I watch for one year's Spirit Awards aren't eligible for our top 10 that year, but they become eligible the following year. So that's the case with my number 1 film this year. It's a film I watched for last year's Spirit Awards. For all the joy and good spirits baked in with the majority of my top 10, including Wonka, the films that gave me joy, this particular film is not for the faint of heart. It grabs you by the neck and forces you to confront the deepest recesses of your soul. Film is French indie Our Father, the Devil, which is about a female African refugee living in France whose world gets thrown into chaos when a man who abused her as a youth and killed her family and many of her friends in her home country reappears in her life as the new town priest. And he's not disingenuous either. He was a monster who had an epiphany of clarity and decided to atone for his heinous crimes by devoting his life to God and in service of others. He was not seeking her out. This is all happen chance that they would reconnect in this way. More than any other film I've ever seen, it forces us to ask if there are crimes that are beyond forgiveness, no matter what. And by extension, are there traumas that we cannot ever truly recover from? And as a result of that, is there a level of violence that is ever justifiable? And is there any extent of revenge that can help you feel better, or is that a slippery slope? So many questions posed in the film and no real easy answers, if any, all stemming from man's inexplicable inhumanity to man, and specifically here, the continued global, multifaceted abuse of women. Kelly's already talked about the feminist element to a lot of films that she saw this year, and this film would fall into that category as well in a very different, dark way. The performances in the film are breathtaking, only adding to the heart-wrenching, gripping, unforgettable, challenging film, Our Father, the Devil. Is there any chance you guys have heard of or seen this film? I did not think so. Which leads me to this, which did not come up. So I can now reveal that I guessed wrong and did not even make the list. At least I got Thalia's number 2. So for my guess for Kelly's number 1, way off, I guess. I went here with Priscilla.
No.
Let's segue to a part the fans like. I don't love being negative, but the fans love it when we talk about this. It's time to talk about our worst film of 2023, our least favorite. And once on the, only once historically has a film appeared on someone's top 10 that was also the worst, someone else's worst film of the year. 2019, my number one film, Ad Astra, was Jim's least favorite film of the year. So we'll see if that repeats somehow. Thalia, your least favorite film of 2023.
Ferrari. My God, did I hate that Italian accents, and then it was so gruesome. It was terrible. That's my feelings about Ferrari.
We reviewed the film, and the last current that we did, I don't remember the number, the last current we did of this season in late December, early January, whenever that was released. So we've talked about this movie ad nauseum, and as Thalia knows, that I'm a lot more positive on Ferrari. It's one of my favorite directors. In middle of the road, I liked it mostly. I have a lot of quibbles, but a lot of things I liked about it. The screenplay in particular, I thought was it had that balance of information and character that I like. I don't want to relitigate it from that last episode. One of the hardest things to do is to get a lot of dense information across. Scripts like Schindler's List do this, get a lot of dense information across. Awakenings is another one coming around. Dense information, but also without losing that character detail. And that's what I really appreciated about the script and the screenplay. It's that balance that I've talked about a lot tonight in the negative. And for all the negatives that Ferrari has, and I have a lot that we talked about before, I did think the screenplay was enough to give it a mostly positive feeling on my account, but it didn't sniff my top 10 for what it's worth, but it's probably the upper half of my 100 films. So, more disagreement. Kelly, did you see Ferrari by chance from director Michael Mann?
The script would have been more interesting had it been from the point of view of Penelope Cruz's character. I don't know why they cast Adam Driver to be someone who's 20 years older.
Yeah, that was one of my huge negatives. A huge negative for me.
It was so stupid. No one was comfortable with their accents.
All right, so Kelly, your least favorite film of 2023?
It's The Color Purple. I hated it. I wasn't kidding.
For the second, and it's not me, thank God, for the second time, we have something that made someone's top 10 be someone's worst film. So Kelly, do you have more that you want to say about it? I know you've said a lot.
I would rather not spend any more time on that film.
Okay. I've been afraid of revealing my least favorite film of 2023 because I was worried Kelly wouldn't speak to me again. There were a number of films that I thought were pretty bad this year. Out of 103, that wouldn't surprise you. But this one was the most surprisingly offensive to me, especially given my number one films of the last few years, which, as I've mentioned, the last 2 years have both been animated films as my number one films of the year. At the risk of drawing the ire of Kelly, while I appreciate the intertextuality to the tradition of Disney animation, I found Wish to be confused and extremely flat. It has the blunt moral that we are what we wish, which feels simplistic and naive even for a movie aimed at kids. I know Disney can do better, so it doesn't really get a pass. The world building is limited and incomplete, even convenient at times. Not only does it not feel fresh, it's not even interesting or charming to me. The songs aren't awful, but they aren't memorable either, and none of the voice actors really stand out. The dialogue tries to be clever often and never really succeeds. There was attempts to try and explain Magnifico's descent into villainy, but it's almost as if they gave up on that. If there were a more legitimate reason for him to feel the way he did, independent of his traumatic past, this could have been about the dangers of utopia, an animated unveiling of Marxism versus communism without losing any of its silly characters or songs. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I'm just saying it could have had something. Even if it didn't want to be that politically specific, it could have been about the good of the community versus the good of the individual. And therein lie a genuine moral dilemma, a la Raya and the Last Dragon. Asha's initial concerns come out of a place of utter selfishness. And that's fine if the film wants to explore that, but instead the film stands behind her with all it's got, and that feels like almost bad messaging. Why should her family's needs come above everyone else's? And even if she doesn't see that, the film should. So to me, I feel like it's sloppy thematically and a dull story put in a package that is neither visually interesting or entertaining. Perhaps it was a high expectation situation that ranked this so low for me, but it stuck with me, and I was thinking about my least favorite of the year. So Kelly, I'm afraid.
I saw a TikTok about how bad the villain song was, and I haven't seen it.
Interesting. Just because of the bad song.
It didn't bode well for me.
Thalia?
I agree with everything Jonathan said about Wish. Fox and I were both just like, what is this movie? The best part was the credits when they shared the stars, and they played it When You Wish Upon a Star song, and they showed the old characters.
The credit.
I just really disliked Wish. I wish it had never happened.
Oh, look what she did there. See what she's a writer, ladies and gentlemen. You saw how she did that?
Very
anyway.
clever.
All right, so now's the time, guys, for me to give you the opportunity. If you have any closing thoughts, did you guys have fun tonight? Like, we had some disagreements, we had some agreements, we had some huge disagreements. How do you guys feel? Did you have fun? Or, like, any things that you're thinking about after going through these films tonight? Anybody can go first.
That's your big thought? This was so much fun for me because I have not, I mean, really, since I think I had my daughter 10 years ago, watched this many movies purposefully. And Jonathan, I used to do this with you all the time. And it has been some of the most fun I've had in the last few weeks, just like trying to watch movies and watching bad movies and good movies and comparing them, thinking about them and talking about them. And so I really remembered how much I love movies doing this. And so thank you.
Well, I should say thank you to you for stepping in last minute for a society member that has left us. You came in and saved the day, quite frankly.
You know, I feel great. I feel good. I enjoyed it. I'm so happy that you were able, Thalia, that you were able to do the show.
All right, so guys, I'm going to close things out. So obviously on Thursday, March 7th, this coming Thursday is our 1998 in review, but our next show is tomorrow. It's our Oscar preview. Some of these films are Oscar nominees, but many are not. So check out what we choose amongst this year's crop. But some people go straight to the Oscar preview to fill out their ballots. With that, ladies and gentlemen, why don't Kelly and Thalia say goodbye to the audience?
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to declare this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society adjourned, but we will see you tomorrow night.